Hey everybody, Howard here with Beginning Jazz Guitar Part 4, okay? If you haven't seen in particular parts 1 and 2, you might want to check that out first before getting into this particular video, because what I'm going to do is take the information that I shared with you in those first 2 or 3 lessons, primarily the first 2, and talk about putting it to actual musical use, okay? So we're going to be using scales, modes, and arpeggios to play through these changes. And these are going to be pretty standard changes like you might find in Autumn Leaves, Spain by Chick Corea. Just some pretty standard stuff. But let me map out the chords first, okay? We're going to be moving from an A minor 7 to a D9 to a G major 7, the infamous 2-5-1 jazz progression. And then we're going to go to a C major 7, then an F sharp minor 7 flat 5, and then we're going to be using a B7 flat 13, and then make that into a B7, and then finally an E minor 9 to an E7 flat 9. So that's going to be the chord progression. Now, most of these chords were covered in my first lesson, okay, Beginning Jazz Guitar Part 1. So I'm going to play a solo and I'm going to provide you with a rhythm track, okay? So this rhythm track will be these exact changes with little drums, percussion, and bass. And the chords will last long enough that you have time to breathe, okay? Because what we want to talk about is how to play through these changes using the modes and the arpeggios, which we covered in the first 2 lessons, okay? So first let me play the solo and then we'll talk about exactly what I did and break it down bit by bit. So, as mentioned, the very first chord in line is an A minor 7. And what I did was I just formed a simple A minor 7 arpeggio. You've got that little passing tone in there, which I've talked about before in the jazz lessons and jazz solos that I've done. It's nice to dip in and out of the scale instead of being totally diatonic. You can... That adds that nice little jazz flavor. So you're just going a half step below or a half step above the natural scale tone, all right? So again, the first pattern is... And then again, this is still an A minor 7 arpeggio, just in a different fingering. So we have... And then I'm moving right into a scale, okay, a mode. And what I'm thinking about here is the D Mixolydian mode. Because that would be the natural mode to accompany the 5 chord, the dominant 7th chord, or in this case, a 9th chord, okay? And I'm starting on the 3rd of the chord, the major 3rd of the chord. I've talked about that a lot in previous lessons, about targeting the notes of the chords that make a difference, so to speak. I don't want to get too technical. This is still beginning jazz guitar, so to speak. But by targeting the 3rds or the dominant 7ths, you really get inside the chord. Even if you're running a mode or a scale pattern, it's good to start on those notes. And you can say I started on the major 3rd, which is F sharp. and I ended on that note as well. And then just kind of played around with that idea. And you can see I'm just staying right inside that mode because it really captures the chord, right? So what we have so far then is so you can see I'm using those notes that are outside of the scale, half step above, half step below, whatever you like. That's just a nice sort of jazz practice, if you will, okay? So now we find ourselves on the G major 7, and that's why we hit, right, just thinking about that inversion of the chord, and ironically, the major 3rd of the D9 chord is also the major 7th of the G major 7 chord, so that's nice. You keep a sort of common tonality, it's called, and it sounds pretty sweet, right? And then I just went right into a G major 7 arpeggio. And again, these arpeggios were covered in the very first lesson, but of course you can use different fingerings to play them. For instance, a G major 7 off of the A string. And what I did in this particular solo, because I'm thinking of this position here, is I played a G major 7 arpeggio off of the D string. Again, just staying with scale tones, the particular mode that I'm thinking about, in this case, the Ionian mode, the major scale. Really getting inside the chord as much as you can, which is not too difficult to do, but just worth mentioning. And then, of course, we find our way to the C major 7 chord. And again, I'm just thinking of a simple C major 7 arpeggio, all of which was covered in beginning Jazz Guitar Part 1. And I also spoke about inversions, all the different ways to play these major 7th chords, right? That's a really cool thing to know, so that you can target the chord wherever you happen to be. So that's exactly what I did here. I just used this inversion, right, coming right off of that. And again, dipping in and out of those natural scale tones. So that was all played over the C major 7 chord. That type of thing right there, right? And then we find our way to the F sharp minor 7 flat 5 chord. And I did a couple of things here that I want to point out that I think are fun and interesting. One of the things I always try to do with chords, particularly jazz voicings, is see the other chord inside the chord you're playing. For instance, if you have a D minor 7 chord, there's actually an F major chord in there. But you can think of it as an F major chord with a D in the bass. And that makes a D minor 7th chord. Same thing with a C major 7. You can think of an E minor being in there. Right? So there's always another chord hiding out in the chord that you're playing. So what I did on this F sharp minor 7 flat 5 was I'm visually seeing an A minor chord. C, E, A, an inverted A minor chord. So I played off of that to tie it in as much as I can with keeping it melodic off of that line. So I'm kind of trying to tie those two chords together as much as I can. So playing from that C major 7th again, we have. That's played over, once again, the F sharp minor 7 flat 5. And then I played a full-on F sharp minor 7 flat 5 arpeggio. Again, this is an arpeggio that was covered in the very first lesson. That's it. F sharp minor 7 arpeggio. So we've got over that particular chord. And then we move to that B7 flat 13th, which then changes to B dominant 7th. And I played a B dominant 7th arpeggio against that. Again, an arpeggio that was covered in the first lesson. So all of that ties. You can see my thought process, so to speak. I'm thinking about the chord, I'm thinking about the arpeggio, I'm thinking about scale tones, and just really getting inside the chord. And then we find our way to the E minor 9th chord. And here I'm definitely just thinking about a natural minor scale, right? But kind of trying to do a few interesting things with it. Phrasing is really important as well. We'll talk about that in a future lesson. But let me play that one for you nice and slow. All of that right over that E minor 9th chord. And of course the last chord to deal with is the E7 flat 9. And the mode that I'm choosing to accompany this chord is called a Phrygian dominant. It's the 5th mode of the A harmonic minor scale. I won't go into too much theoretical detail about that just yet because again, this is beginning jazz guitar for those of you guys who have been playing for a few years now, maybe more, and just want to get into jazz. I'll keep it simple and just say that the reason I'm using this particular mode is because it just sounds great against those kinds of chords, okay? It's as simple as that. It captures the chord. You can just really hear that, right? So exactly what I played coming off of the previous statement was this. So I'm just playing a simple sequential pattern. Just trying to really bring that chord out. And then to be honest, I finished it up, I'm thinking Phrygian. And then ending it with a simple A minor chord, okay? So there you go, just a few ideas, bringing some of the stuff covered in the first couple of lessons especially into an actual improvised solo, or a solo that you can learn note for note if you want to, just to feel for yourself what's going on. But the takeaway here is I hope that you just grasp the ideas, right, of how to combine the modes with the arpeggios as you move through chord progressions like this, because this is really common and standard jazz stuff. A lot of fun to play over it, okay? So there you go with Beginning Jazz Guitar Part 4, and I shall see you guys soon. Hi guys, Howard here with adding jazz flavor to your blues guitar solos, okay? So what I'm going to do here is just a simple 12-bar blues using 3 chords, A minor 7, D minor 7, and then E7 sharp 9 for the 5 chord, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to base it around the blues, of course, so the blues scale will be a big part of it. But I also want to get inside the chords by landing the major thirds, maybe some arpeggios, octaves, using passing tones, etc. All devices that are used in standard jazz and jazz blues playing, okay? So I'll just play the solo first, and then I'll break it down phrase by phrase. There'll be 8 phrases in all, and I'll play them nice and slow for you with the tab on the screen, but also I'll talk about why I chose them and how you can employ them in your own playing, okay? Okay, so let's dive right in. The first phrase is really simple. It's just a simple blues lick based on the blues scale right over that A minor 7 chord. Nice and slow. And then we move into the second phrase, which is quite a bit longer, okay? But it brings in a lot of that jazz element. Passing tones, or what I call using tones that are outside of the scale, kind of dipping into each note, which sounds pretty cool. So it starts out like that and then quickly weaves back into the blues scale. So let me play that one nice and slow. And all of that, of course, is played over an A minor 7th chord, as is phrase 3, which is... Now, right there, I'll talk about that in a bit, but right there, it connects with the 4 chord, D minor 7th, and I incorporate an arpeggio into that, okay? So let's talk about this first, okay? Once again, we're on an A minor 7 chord, and I'm playing an A minor inversion, and then what might be called an E minor triad, but I'm thinking of it more in relationship to the C major 7 chord, which is the natural harmony chord to the A minor 7th. And then outlining that A minor 7 chord again. So let me play that nice and slow. And then right there at the 5th fret on the A string, we are connecting with that D minor 7th chord. And I use an arpeggio for that, which is more of a minor 9th sound. A minor 7th would be, but I'm playing, giving it that nice kind of minor 9th sound. So let me do that nice and slow as well. So putting all of that together, we have... And then staying with that minor 9th sound, so that's a sweep off of the 10th fret across the first 3 strings. And once again, connecting with that minor 9th sound and just playing some scale tones. And there's that jazz flavor again, playing a note outside the scale, a half step away, and sliding into it, just like I did here. That's a really nice thing to do. And right there it was 12 to 14 across the G and the D strings, and then a couple of double stops. I'm doing them a half step away, but you could do them a whole step as well. So that's a pretty long phrase. So let me play the whole thing for you, nice and slow. Right, and then up to speed. And then we are on to the next phrase, number 4, okay? Now we're still on the D minor 7th chord, which is important to note. We're still on the D minor 7th chord. And again, I'm kind of hanging with that minor 9th sound, okay? Although I do add the G, which would be a minor 7th toward the end of the phrase, but it's... Once again, we're still inside that D minor 7th chord. And then it's strictly a blues phrase. Right? And so what I'm doing is I'm kind of looking at the blues scale in a different way. Allowing me to, you know, put a little more flavor into it. But it starts on the flat 5. This whole lick emphasizes the flat 5. So let me spell that out. Now I consider all of that one phrase, okay? I consider this all phrase 4. So let's move on to phrase 5, okay? Phrase 5 is more of a standard blues thing. You can think of Stevie Ray Vaughan and a lot of players like that. But the phrase is... Alright, so there's some hybrid picking in there. If you isolate the notes, the D string and the G string, it's... barring at the 5th fret and adding that to the G string notes. And then I play a simple phrase. And I like to do that kind of thing. That's kind of like Jimmy Page, you know, but it's cool to play a phrase in an octave lower or an octave higher and then switch it up, repeating the phrase. So that is... And then we move into phrase 6, which takes place over the E7 sharp 9 chord. And what I played there is... So what I'm doing is just getting right inside that chord. If you look at what the chord shape is, I'm playing to the major 3rd of the chord, which would be right there, back to the root. And then, and a couple of double stops. And what I'm thinking about there is an E7 chord, and then the E7 sharp 9, kind of decorating both. One more time, nice and slow. And then, of course, we're moving backwards through the progression off of the 5, back to the 4, and back to the 1. And I play a string of octaves there. Octaves are obviously classic to jazz guitar playing, but I'm kind of separating them out with a little glissando, if you will. So what I'm doing there is obviously just octaves. I'll play it nice and slow, but again, kind of glissing, if you will, off of that high note. once again with a simple blues scale at the end. So, and I'm using alternate strokes, obviously down, up, down, up. And a simple double stop at the end. Once again, a half step away from where you might normally be. Sliding from 4 to 5 on the B and the G strings and glissing off of that, okay? And so the last phrase, phrase 8, just incorporates a little bit of chromaticism. And of course you can use all 4 fingers if you want to. All right, so let me play that one nice and slow. So there you go, adding a little jazz flavor to your blues solos, okay? I'll run the solo again right now, and so you can just check it out again without having to spin back, okay? I hope you guys enjoyed it, and as always, all the best to everyone, and I'll see you guys real soon.